Shemi Shmuel quotes a medrash that teaches that on the steps leading up to the throne of Shlomo Melech, there were either inscribed on the steps or as he ascended the steps, there was a recitation by a speaker, a sayer, an announcer of the first 6 mitzvahs that are described in this coming week's Parsha. So inasmuch as the king is a judge, we understand not to be Sate Mishpat, not to bend the law, which means even in some subtle way to communicate the way you're relating to the presentation, the depositions of the parties. Don't communicate some kind of a subtle bias. Lo sikach shechet, not to take bribery, and lo sate din, and you can't bend the din. Those are obvious because the king is also a judge. But then there are 3 other mitzvahs that were part of this program, of the either recitation or the inscription, or perhaps both, that need a little bit more understanding. One is not to bring a sacrifice which is a korban, which has a mum, a blemish. 2, not to bring anymore a sacrifice on a matzeva, on a monument. The difference between a monument and a mizbeach is murkav, it's made up of stones, other stones. Monument is a single stone. That was mutter before Maimed Har Sinai. We found that by the Ovos. But then it became also after Maimed Har Sinai. And the final one of the 3 of this second set of 3 of the total 6 is not to plant an asherah, this tree which was used for idolatry, but then we learn out from the pasuk any tree near the mizbeach, in the vicinity of the mizbeach. Some communities even extended that not to have any kind of tree planting in the vicinity of a Beit Knesset as well. Obviously, not everybody is naik like that. Question is the second 3. So the Shem Mishmuel focuses on that, and he talks about the Balmum. Chazal call somebody who's arrogant is a mum. It's a mum. It's a blemish. It's a blemish in that person. So that would fit for the king, because the loshan is used in Chazal. 2 is the difference. King, the Rambam says, is the Melech is Leiv Ha'am. He has to bring people together. He has to inspire and unite the tzibur. So he has to take like a mizbeach, unlike the monument, which already is 1 stone, but more like the mizbeach, to collect together the various inclinations, personalities, and bring them into a sense of achdus. But it has to be mulkav, made up of the many. And the king has to remember that he has a certain relationship to the people and a responsibility to the people as well. What about Asherah? What about the tree? Not just the idolatry tree, but any kind of tree. Here the Meshech Chochmah offers a very interesting approach. He says that trees are nourished, sustained by the earth, the moisture and the minerals of the earth. Now there was a position by Ovdei Avodah Zarah, by the idolaters, that they were sustaining their Avodah Zarah through the bringing of their sacrifices. That was why they were ingratiating themselves in their support of the Avodah Zarah, ingratiating themselves in the support of the Avodah Zarah. Says Rameh Simcha, he quotes Ben Azai. Ben Azai says, take note that all places that korbanos are listed, it only says Yud Kei Vav Kei. It doesn't use the term Kael, the Aleph and the Lamed, and it doesn't use Elokim, because those are manifestations of the Hanhoga, how we experience how the Rebbeinu Shalom manifests himself, shows himself in the world. And we're not influencing the Rebbeinu Shalom because the Rebbeinu Shalom is beyond influence. He has created a relationship to give us the opportunity to gain merits, mitzvahs, chusim, so that could be accredited to us. But he doesn't need it. He doesn't need. Therefore, only Yud Kei Vav Kei, the name which is the Mechuyev HaMetzias, is the only necessary reality, which is not dependent. It's the only utterly independent reality, is the Rebbeinu Shalom. Yud Kei Vav Kei. Similarly, says Rameh Simcha, unconsciously we make associations. That's the way people's minds work. They work by association with psychological entities, not logical entities. We're not computers. We're made up of emotions and physiology, and they are constantly impacting and interacting with our mindset, and that shapes the psyche of the individual. So because of, if we would plant trees in the vicinity of the Mizbeach, we would make that association, just like the tree is being sustained, supported, grows from this earth. Similarly, the korbanos, the sacrifices, the offerings that we are bringing on the Mizbeach is sustaining the celestial entity which has dictated this offering. Not true. The Rebbeinu Shalom is beyond. He's the only Mechuyev HaMetzias. He is what he was, what he will be. He's not changed. It's for us. And in order to maintain this discipline, but then Rameh Simcha takes it one step further. The Sanhedrin sat in the Lishkas HaGozes, near the Mizbeach. And it's again an extension of this same principle. Rabbi Shimon HaTzadik says, beginning of Pirkei Avos, Rameh Simcha quotes, the world is based on Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasodim. Later on, his progeny, Shimon ben Gamliel, says, "Ein olam kayim ela al ha'emes," that's Torah. Din, we'll come back to in a moment, and Sholom, which is Gemilas Chasodim. What's Din? Din and Avodah are parallel according to this analysis. Why are Din and Avodah parallel? Because just like Avodah has to transcend any kind of advantage that you might have associated that is being provided to the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't need your advantages. So says the Novi Micha, so says Yeshayahu. The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't need, by definition. The Rebbeinu Shalom is beyond need. Similarly, the Dayan has to catapult himself above any kind of subjective bias. He has to be beyond any kind of need. He has to be on a level that he has a purely objective view of what it is. What it is that the Ribbon Shalom wants of me. I saw that there were Gedolei Musa, that sometimes if they were asked to write a certain letter, and it was something that required some thought. So first they wrote the letter, didn't give it over, thought about it afterwards, so that the lethargy, laziness, the reluctance to write the letter unconsciously shouldn't be a variable in whether or not they're going to write the letter. Then they can purely, objectively make the evaluation. Should the letter be given? Shouldn't it be given? It's already written. Now it can be dealt with. Similarly, the dayan has to have this kind of a purely objective state. In support of this, Reb Meir Simcha brings that a dayan, the appointment of a dayan who is the wrong appointment, he's somebody who has a bias, he has subjectivity, who has a lack of knowledge. Chazal say it's like planting an asherah by the Mizbeach. Why that analogy? No such thing as casual analogies in Chazal. It's communicating to us, it's teaching us this yesod. Man's reach and search for, we never attain to total objectivity, but what we do is we build in the measures, the safeguards of reducing the subjectivity, of being alert to the potential subjectivity, of surrounding ourselves by all of the resources and people and potential critique that will allow us to stretch further and further in the direction of achieving more objectivity. Over the years, I've heard that the Bochrim will sometimes ask that they came to Ohr Somayach, and I'm hearing arguments in favor of Torah Messinai, in favor of the design by the ultimate designer. But everybody around here is so nice to me. Everybody around here is so pleasant and so forthcoming and so helpful. Doesn't that create a bias that I'm not being objective in my evaluation of the data? What's the answer? The answer is that if you take a paper box, four-sided paper box, and you create a vacuum within, it's going to collapse the walls from the air pressure on the outside. Anybody that, even if he lives in Meir Shalom today, he walks out in the street, he knows there's a world out there. He has hormones. They are subject to all of, even if they are careful and resist the hands-on engagement, but on the peripheral vision, it's hard not to become aware of what's out there. So the most we can do is create an alternative kind of a sense of kinship, camaraderie, beauty in the, what we like to call the BMW of Yiddishkeit. BMW and the slick magazines in the days when we used to be able to fly, once in a while saw those advertisements of the BMW, the ultimate driving machine. Ohr Somayach tries to create the BMW of the beauty, the meaning, and the wisdom of Yiddishkeit, to give somebody a sense of the feel, the taste, that yes, the Rebbeinu Shalom has said, don't indulge here, but there is a possibility of aesthetic pleasure. There is a possibility of enjoying every facet of human experience with the criteria that the Rebbeinu Shalom, like Chazal say, the Gemara and Chulim, that for every food that's non-kosher, there's a kosher food that is that's comparable. The key, Rameh Simcha says in Mishru Kru, in the Parsha of the Korban Pesach, is that every experience that is natural to man, there is an opportunity, a platform, a conduit within Torah, but it has to be channeled. It needs criteria. It's always a question of olam, shona, v'nefesh, time, place, and people. The people listening to the arguments on behalf of Torah Sinai, are we being objective? The guy who walks in first time, he's already heard enough to know that things you should eat, things you shouldn't eat, things that you can do, things you can't do. What is it? The Maskilim used to say, we from Jews have tied the Rebbeinu Shalom up, Kavayochel, in tefillin and tzitzis. Yeah. But we have given man the opportunity that the tefillin and the tzitzis bring us to a sense of discipline and objectivity, that we can coordinate the Rosh and the Yad and the Lev, that the fusion, the bringing it together, and that only then can we partake of the world. Every one of us, every Jew is a melech if he's using moach, lev, and kaved in that sequence. Mind, emotions, and the hormones. When it's reversed, it becomes kalem. It's destructive. I have to be able to step back for myself, like Rameh Simcha says, by the nausea that Shimon HaTzadik didn't want to eat from the korban of a nausea. Who asked you to deprive yourself of drinking wine and all of the ancillary isurim, until he met this nausea from the Dorum, and he was so well motivated to want to. He ate from that osham, even though he had brought himself to this matzav where he didn't have to be, to take the Naziris and then to be Tomei and then to have to bring the Korban. He's Medayak, Rameh Simcha over there, that Belois Yemei Nizoi, at the completion of his Nazirus, Yovi Oso, he brings Oso. Who's who? Who's Oso? Himself, Rashi says. Yavias Atzmai. It's a peculiar way to say, come. Just say he comes. Rameh Simcha says he has to get to the point where he can view himself as if he was another. That's the goal of Nazirus, to attain to a level of utter, absolute objectivity, and fleeting, maybe, but having experienced that, will be more objective, more often, more frequently, and the act of learning Torah is what gives us this opportunity when we taste the masikas of Torah, when we taste the sense of interacting with the clarity of Ruach HaKodesh, that there's a touch of it that in fact seeps in to the mind and heart, that begins to saturate the person in such a manner that he is partaking Klal Yisrael, Am Yisrael, as the Mishnah says, as the Gemara says, we're B'nai Malachim. It affects the halachas of Kriya Shema, of davening, B'nai Malachim. B'nai Malachim, Malchus is shayach to these 6 mitzvahs of stretching for objectivity, of reaching for a sense of having self-awareness, and it's only through that self-awareness that we can, in turn, how do we get there? But that self-awareness helps us govern ourselves, and if we govern ourselves, we can find what it is that our shlichus is and maximize it. Shem Yiten, that through the awareness, consciousness of our own shlichus and our own strengths and our own weaknesses, we can find that equilibrium of olam shana v'nefesh, place, time, and people, of how to apply, what to apply. Hashem Yitain, that we shall have the keiches and siyata d'shmaya to go forward.